a little bit then about the notion of process. We know now what drives the elements coming together, but then let's talk a bit about process.
Okay. So one day I was working on some image and some tape, you know, just regular tape, clear tape, kind of got on the image, and you know, I cleaned it off, and I could see the image cleanly underneath the tape. So a lot of times when now I do my transfers, I get a roll of tape, and I press the image on it, wash it off, and cut it off, and then I come on back on there. And the great thing about it is it transfers this way. So it turns the image around. So that's what I'm saying. I want people to see it differently. So, and I didn't think it was accident. I had the accidents, as I used to say. So that's one of the trade secrets that I use as far as process. These 14 by 17s, I wanted to see how they were going to work that size before I blew them up. And I just started working in, and they just started working on their own. And so as you see the whole 150 of them, like all in the grid section, you can kind of see where I started to grow differently. Some of them became very narrative, which I didn't want them to become. And so anytime the works became narrative, I went smaller. So I just cut that paper in half. And so it made me concentrate on the message that I was wanting to go, that I want to send out, that I want to project. And one of the things I did talk about in these is that I don't feel that you can do these works without having compassion. And so I want to hope, well, I hope that the compassion part is there and people can see that. Because I have compassion for the people and these girls because this whole idea of self is so very important.
I'm so sorry. Daddy had a meeting, guys. So this is. Can you stand, Miss Norvell, too? Oh, get up off the floor, please.
Hey, Jerome, look, I have red socks on too. Ain't that cool? Yeah, I'm not. He doesn't care.
Yes. Okay. Lost my train of thought. So the 150, the sequence of 150 was the first time you did a sequence of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing about graduate school, anytime you say you want to do something, 100 of these, they come and say, well, why don't you do 200? Why are you stopping at 100? And it was like, I'm trying to work through this, so Peter Beachware came in and said, so I had them all out, I just had 20, so I think I'm going to do 100. I felt I could do 100. He said, well, why are you stopping at 100? Do 200, do 300. And so I started on that track. And then I started realizing I was trying to keep up with the numbers. And then I had to slow it down and really start thinking. And then I did some big ones in between.
So I'm glad you mentioned graduate school because a lot of the work that's here sprang from your graduate exhibition from Syracuse, which was just earlier this year.
Yes.
So it's hot off the press, but that notion of being driven by something was really prevalent. And I'm curious, since you blame me from graduate school, was there anything good that came out of it? I think this is great that came out of graduate school. So
what came out of graduate school, especially in Syracuse, is I learned how to drive in the snow. So I'm not afraid of the snow. What else could it be?
But I mean, I'm just wondering where the challenge to do the 120. I mean, I think in many ways it's sort of that challenge to actually work in this format, which is somewhat small because you have to work very large as these test tube lectures. But yet, you know, it's something about the repetitive nature of working small and utilizing some of the imagery again and again in different things.
Right, because one of the things I think that happens is that the same narrative is repeated over and over and over and over again. So that's why I kept saying it's the same, it's the same, it's the same. But if you see a person as the same, not as individuals, then you're going to attach that same narrative to that person. So that's why I started with, you know, repetitive of hood rat girl, just kind of repeating it over and over and over, and see how that's scoring her. It's this beautiful person. But I don't mean that because it's me, but I'm just saying. I mean, it's a kid, and then this whole notion of, the hood rat, and this, each time that's in, it's leaving a mark. Maybe not a mark that you can not necessarily see all the time, but a mark nonetheless.
Well, the thing I noticed about the hood rat girl piece was not so much of the marking of the face, which was the repetitive and then repetition of the term.
Yes.
So each iteration, you read it differently, and because you read it differently, it gets more and more obscure, which I think the notion of obscuring things is part and parcel of the work. But I wonder how conscious you were that it was happening with the language itself.
I was not. Every time I put words in my pictures, people say, stop, don't, please stop. So I tried that, to put the words in and see how it would work. It's one of the first ones I've done that to. So I was really happy when my 2-year-old was looking through the work and he picked that piece. I was like, wow, I'm the only one who's ever picked that piece. It was really cathartic and good to do.
No, it's really a great piece because, the repetitive nature of it, and then you get girl with that girl, so it starts to make you say things differently, even within your mind. So that notion of perception and how things are stated or understated or exaggerated really must up. So let's go to a couple of other pieces. I want to, but let me ask you this, because you have both paintings and then you have the works on paper and then you have this more sculptural work. Which to me is the one thing totally different from the others. So,
and I thank you for that too.
Okay.
And how that because Valerie, one of the things that Valerie told me is that, I did a lot of 2D work and, a lot of flat work. And he said, this work, no matter what it is, how to be able to move in certain different movements. I mean, I don't want to be like the person who, we got media whole just on a lot of stuff. But I'm just saying that I'm not trying to be that person, but I want the work, if the work is strong enough and the message is there, it should be able to go over several different mediums. And one of the things that I tried to do at Syracuse was to try and have the freedom to try to do some type of sculpture installation piece. And they're not always been successful. I've been told, believe me, I was told. So I still want to continue to do them. And what beautiful was, I was telling Gary earlier, is that I chose that this bag, this burlap, because burlap is texture that's made from the skin of a tree. And so sometimes we judge by skin, first, before anyone knows anything. And I like the fact that it was protruding out. And so when I wanted to work with human hair, and I went to a barbershop in Syracuse, and I had to pick up hair for 5 weeks in order to get enough hair to do with my project, this piece. And a lot of the guys said, what are you doing? Doing voodoo? I was like, no, that's what we can, but that's not that. So,
I'm going to be,
So it was really challenging, and I think they're coming along, They're at the very early stages, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, there's something about the sort of history of the use of burlap. And the notion of hair, which, as they stated, is such a loaded thing. But even the notion of natural black hair and its relationship to cotton. And then picking cotton, which was put in these huge burlap sacks as they were drugged through the fields and into the gin. So, you can blame me for that. I'll take that. But let's talk about the sort of transitional pieces too, because I know since the graduate work, you've also continued on some things. So where are the new directions also in the work too?
Okay. Well, the new direction more likely is that piece right there.
This one.
Buttress. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do was very important that really these things, after doing them so little, could they work larger? That was the key. So this was the first one I did to see if it was able to go from such a small image into a larger thing. So what I did was use my painting skills, which I paint, And I really wanted to texturize this piece. I wanted it to be old and useless and something that could be easily tossed away, this whole texture. And so when I did this little girl, I wanted to say, this is an old image, but it's still a new image. Because I put these hands in and these feet, and these hands were that our bodies still, no matter how long and how old we may become, don't belong to us. It's always this notion of someone else telling our stories or telling us how to use our bodies. And this is a very important piece because, for the reason that it was able to be blown up, but it kind of is my signature piece. You know, all the work that I did in graduate school, I think this is the one that I'm most proudest of because I thought it said everything that I wanted it to say in the work. And also I put my handprint in it.
But I think it's also interesting, because it moves it from the paper back onto the canvas. And that there are these sort of odes to minimalism too, right? I mean, there's the grid.
Yes.
There's monogram again.
Yes.
And so where you were talking about the negation of blacks and the black presence in, the sort of modernism, which, I think historically we go back and say it was because of, the image of, Picasso and, that presence is very much front and center in modernism too. That bringing these images right back to that space, taking on modernism and reinserting the black body itself into the conversation. So I think that new direction, still retaining the sort of process that we're using, it's a really nice jumping off for us. So I don't want to. I know you had a series of notes to read from, but since we have people who are also listening, I want to sort of expand the circle of the conversation, not end the conversation, but expand the circle of the conversation, so that if other people have ideas or comments or questions, that we can kind of expand the reach and make this conversation much richer, including the voices too. Yes.
You made reference just then to Andrea.
It was just the notion what she was saying earlier about the dress itself was taken from a Mondrian.
Yeah, it's taken from a Mondrian painting.
Which you then cut and collaged on
No.
the figure?
I just drew it. I just, got it on some paper and I drew from the Mondrian painting. I drew a dress and I just, attached everything. I drew this. I made it small and then I blew it up really good.
Okay.
So all of this is drawn. You can kind of see somewhere I put my little dots in. So all of this was printed one big image just right here. But it's from a little, and when I was in Syracuse, I had it blown up really big. But yeah, this is actually not Mondrian's. This is my thing as an homage to him.
So why Mondrian?
Well, I mean, it was abstract. It was placed in art history, and